Jesus never existed. Do you want to know how I know? It's basically become a daily occurrence in my comment section where somebody will appear and they'll drop this little nugget of wisdom like it's a huge gotcha or something. And it goes like this. Back in Jesus' day, almost everybody was illiterate, meaning that almost nobody could read and write. Additionally, the cost of writing implements was so astronomically high that even the people who knew how to write were largely unable to afford the things that would make them able to write. And this seems like a really good argument for all of 3 seconds, and then you think about it for a moment and you realize just how dumb it really is. The people that tell us that almost everybody back then was illiterate, almost nobody could afford writing implements, and that Jesus' followers were all a bunch of illiterate fishermen are the same people who tell us that these same fishermen, specifically Simon Peter, James the Just, St. John, were able to compose these long, fluent Greek compositions that deal with all manner of higher philosophical and theological ideas. It doesn't make any sense. This is when somebody will usually pop up in the comments and say, Ben, it's called an amanuensis, a secretary for hire that you would just pay to take dictation when you couldn't write it down yourself. Fair enough. But I have one question. When you read the books that are attributed to Peter and John and James in the New Testament, do you get the sense that these books were in any way, shape, or form composed by uneducated, illiterate fishermen from 2,000 years ago in Galilee? They would not have even been able to speak Greek, let alone dictate a polished composition from start to finish in Greek. And the concepts that are spoken about just in 1 Peter, they would not have been able to even comprehend those concepts if they were as uneducated as they are said to have been. But let's just grant, for the sake of argument, just for a moment, that Jesus existed, his disciples were illiterate, but that they hired secretaries to whom they could dictate their epistles so that they could spread the gospel. So if all those things are true, then when the disciples were hiring these secretaries to take dictation for them, why didn't they also dictate gospels? Why don't we have a gospel according to Peter that is written in the first person that records his memories of his time working with and traveling with Jesus? And ditto for all of the other apostles. For example, with the Gospel of Mark, people say things like, oh, well, the Gospel of Mark is actually Peter's reminiscences, but Mark didn't know what order the stories went in, so he just did his best to create a narrative. No, this is stupid. It's stupid. Or the Gospel according to John. Well, the Gospel according to John was written really, really late compared to the other ones, but that's only because Jesus said that John might tarry till he returned, and John may have lived to be extremely old, or he may even still be alive today. No, this is dumb. You are bending yourselves into logical pretzels in order to legitimize fairy tales. So if those books of the New Testament that are attributed to actual followers of Jesus were really written by those men, then they were educated and literate, and they have no excuse at all for not leaving behind first-hand eyewitness testimony regarding their time with Jesus. And if they really were uneducated and illiterate, there's no way they could compose those books because they wouldn't have even been able to grasp the philosophical concepts that those books are dealing with, let alone dictate them coherently in polished Greek to a secretary.